Hi there, Glocal citizens. Welcome back to the podcast that inspires a borderless mindset around manifesting a new world. I am your host, Florence Sadu, coming to you from Accra. I'm still here, folks. It's been a minute and so much changes and rearranges, but all seeming to be sometimes just the same. With that in mind, we have a flashback forward episode. My guest this week, she was here first in 2021. So I think just after, I guess maybe during or around when we were in pandemic mode. And we came together based on a mutual group chat, which was the Black Women in Development group chat. And so flash forward now, I believe she's in a new continent. We're going to find out more about that, a whole new role. And so let me get to her bio. She is a business and sustainable development expert specializing in business design, social impact assessment, and strategy development. Her cross-sector career includes technology, natural resources, and the creative economy, where she has led teams, formed partnerships, and built development programs and incubators supporting market-creating innovations. She has worked with organizations like DMZ, a Toronto-based tech incubator and global startup ecosystem, as well as Plan Canada, securing millions in funding and driving social and economic change. A recognized thought leader and ecosystem builder, she was named the Peak Emerging Leader 2024 in the entrepreneurship category. Tina Mbachu Obodozie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Florence. Happy to be here again.
Yay! So let's get started.
Super excited.
Wonderful. So let's refresh our audience's memories and also find out what's new. So where are you from? Where are you local? And what is your craft?
I am from the beautiful Cameroon.
Mm-hmm.
I am local. Well, I guess I should say now I'm local in Canada and Nigeria. But I'm currently in Nigeria. And my craft is innovation. It's building ecosystem to support innovators, its impact, it's African development, so to speak.
African development. I love it.
Yeah. The way we envision it. You know?
Yes, indeed. So tell us a little bit more. Tell us about your Cameroon, because I don't think we really got into the where of your Cameroon, and then also the where of your Nigeria.
Yes. So Cameroon, to be honest, my knowledge of Cameroon is still very, very minimal, right? I was a child, I was born in Cameroon. I grew up there until I was about 11, 12 when I left with my dad. But I think even growing there, like you just always have this sense of community. You have a sense of just being, you know, like your neighbors were your friends, neighbors were family. So I kind of grew up in that environment of just sort of being open with the people around me. And then even then, I think that's when my kind of curiosity about the world started, because I was like, how do some people have and some people don't have, right? So I think as a young child, that's kind of where that question was like cultivated. But I left Cameroon as a kid. I've gone back a few times to see family and friends, but I unfortunately don't go back as often as I should.
And you're almost next door now, so you have no excuse.
I know, right?
Yes.
I think that would be like the perfect sort of scenario that I get to travel there often. But since I moved to Nigeria, I've actually traveled more to East Africa. As opposed to West Africa, which is interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, hopefully, you know, now that I'm here, I'm next door, I can make that trip a bit more often.
Okay. And so tell us about your Nigeria. Lagos, Abuja, where are you at?
I am in Lagos.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
and
I'm in Lagos.
So you made that move about when?
I moved. Okay. So to be honest, the move was not planned. It just happened.
Okay.
It just happened. But I made the move early February of this year. So I've only been here, I guess, for half the year now. Interestingly, though, I've always had that sort of goal of like traveling to Nigeria, visiting. So I started visiting sometime last year. So I came about 2 times last year, before then relocating this February. And obviously also like there are some personal reasons behind the relocation and things like that. So it just made it a bit easier, I guess, to make the jump.
Of course. Okay. So this is great segue into why the where. So how did you come to be living, working, and playing now in Lagos?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, this was not fun at all. It just kind of came out of the blue. But I got married traditionally last year, and my partner is based here in Lagos. We actually hadn't discussed at all like the possibility of me moving because I'm based in Canada. I work there, so ideally, like we would travel or he would come. But his work also here is very sort of like grounding. So it's just sort of like in that early stage of our marriage. So like, okay, you stay there, I stay here. We travel like every quarter, figure it out. And then as we're building, we'll figure out where to be. As the year was just kind of unfolding, I think this was about December late last year. So I was here in December. We spent the holidays together and I went back. And then by early January, I had someone reached out to me about an opportunity that's based here in Lagos, but Pan-African in terms of operation. And they're like, we need someone to start like ASAP, right? And so I started having the conversation with them back and forth. And then I looked at my partner. I'm like, I mean, we weren't planning this, but like, we're going to now be together in the same place. Should I take this, And then I think at that time for me as well, kind of because I've been, I think about 3.5 years at the DMC. So I was already getting restless and I was kind of like really craving being on the continent. I was really craving the heat. I was craving just that flexibility and freedom to travel across different African countries. So I just felt like a lot of the things were just coming together in that moment. So when the opportunity came and they asked me, are you interested? If yes, can you start ASAP? And I was like, yeah, I can do that.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
So it was very, very sporadic, honestly, as a move. It wasn't planned. I think I had about maybe 2 or 3 weeks to actually make the move. So kind of like plan my life in Canada and then, get here.
Okay, wow. So tell us about the opportunity that has you based and relocated now in Lagos.
Yes. So the opportunity is I now lead an organization called Innovate Africa Foundation, which is a nonprofit based here in Lagos, but operating across the continent. So I was hired as executive director to support a lot of our programs, support our partnership efforts, and then just build community around what we're trying to do, right? But as an organization, our goal really is to foster innovation across the continent, support entrepreneurs who are, solving for what we call Africa's wicked problems or wicked challenges, and then support Africa's development accordingly. And we take a bit of an approach that is more like product innovation led. So we're thinking around like the product. So helping innovators design and build tangible products that can work within the African context, as opposed to building products as though you're building for New York or building for Toronto. You're building a product for a woman who's in rural, Kano, for example, somewhere in Kano, and they're able to work within the constraints of that society or the constraints of that market. So we basically take a sort of like product, as I mentioned, product innovation approach to development, a product innovation approach to impact. And we have different programs that support whether the entrepreneur or the product innovator that wants to become a product manager or wants to build products to then become an entrepreneur. But yeah, we're building an ecosystem around that. And then obviously also funding some of the initiatives as well that come through our programs.
Just and still concurrently, you still also are an entrepreneur, right? You have your own consultancy that you that you're also working on, which is kind of in this, it's in the same space, which makes sense of how they've tapped you for this work. And so let us understand how you are now transitioning into a leader of an organization of people, right? You have to manage them and manage deliverables and that type of thing, as opposed to when you're a consultant, you manage other professionals. It's not so much like I'm the one who's responsible for making sure that you are paid, all those things. So tell us a little bit more about that transition.
It's definitely it's been a challenging transition, that's for sure. In the sense that first, I haven't worked in the Nigerian context ever, right? Like I've managed projects. With Plan International, I had one project that was here temporarily. That was here in Nigeria, and then my portfolio got switched a bit. But I had never lived here. I'd never worked here. I'd never managed teams here. Never done business here. So the whole sort of professional environment was very different.
Right.
How you speak to people, how you, even, team members, kind of get them to do what you want them to do, to get things moving forward. Like there is definitely a way around ensuring that, when you're speaking to people, it's not necessarily coming with like that was, Western perspective of like, you do this because I'm the director and I want you to do this, right? It's more sort of like, how do I convey that message so like my people feel that they're part of that process? So then they can own the work that they're doing, because if they feel like they can own the work that they're doing, then I don't have to do a lot of follow-ups, right? With them in terms of deliverables. So there's a lot of that learning that is happening at the moment, a few challenges here and there. So there's that aspect. Obviously, I have the mandate also of growing revenue for the organization through partnerships and things like that. And of course, that supports all of our programs, it supports the people, right? So thinking around how do I build opportunities within the organization for them as we grow, or depending on how we structure some of the initiatives. So you're always kind of thinking, yes, the job has to be done, but like you have the people there, they have their lives, they have their goals, ambitions, and things like that. So how do you make sure that within what you're building, they feel like they can grow within that, right? And they feel like they're a part of that. So it's definitely been a process. It's still something that's in process.
Yeah. It's early days. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very early days.
Yeah. So I like what you said about the idea of how do you convey to your team the sense of ownership, because I feel like that's a huge challenge in employing people across levels in Africa, right? So I see it, from the gardener to the, manager, bank manager, what have you. And so what are some of the tools or tactics that you have found that seem to be working?
Yeah, so I definitely agree with that sentiment. And I think for me though, I've witnessed that primarily with like entry level staff, especially within my organization. I think, when staff feel sort of removed from the planning process, or they feel removed from communication around strategy, like what's the end goal, what's our, if we're running this program, what are we trying to achieve with this program? How does that relate to our overall goal as an organization? Not just having that conversation at like the director's level or like the leader's level, but bringing that conversation also down to everybody else, saying, how do you think about this? Like, what are your sentiments? Like, this is how we're approaching it, but, we would love to hear your input. I think that's worked quite a little bit in terms of, getting them to actually own some of the deliverables. There's still definitely quite a lot to be done, because I still, I see some challenges really in terms of the level of ownership that I envision someone to have for their work. I'm not seeing that, right? But I've seen like some of the things that I'm putting in place, it's sort of like coming up like a little bit. One of the other structures really that I put in place is we have like our sort of standard weekly meetings where we do, sort of like a run through of everybody's. So we pretty much go to like the granular of like, okay, this week between this day and this day, this person is executing on this person is executing on this. So we literally then just have that task board essentially of, staff one, staff two, and it's accessible to everybody within the organization. Even my responsibilities for the weeks, I list them there as well. Right. And if I don't list them because maybe I'm running late when we have these meetings, I share that with them. Right. So it's to kind of give that sort of, you're giving them that accountability to say, okay, you are accountable on a weekly basis for the specific task. And you're not giving them the task. You're not telling them the task. You're giving them the ownership to say, you write your task for the week based on the goal on the project that you're working on. Right. And tell me how I can come in, how I can support, how other staff can come in and support. So ensuring that every week at the beginning of the week, that meeting holds unfailingly.
Yeah.
I think that's been like really, really crucial. And then we do like our end of month sort of like NPR, where we look at kind of just being a bit more data driven. So we look at everything that we've done in that month, what's been working, what hasn't worked, and then gather insights from that, right? So again, the individual staff member will put that report together, because it's fixed on the calendar. We know that on this day, every single month, you have to report on this task. So if you don't report on those tasks, there has to be a reason why it wasn't done, and it has to be a valid reason as to why it wasn't done, right? So you're the one putting it on there. I'm not putting it on there, right? So if you put on a task and you don't deliver on it, and you don't come to me ahead of time to say, we didn't deliver on this task because I didn't have this resource or so on, so on. So then I wouldn't know, right? So it's making those tasks visible to everybody within the team. So that transparency of what's happening, what's being done, and then just ensuring that there's some kind of reporting mechanism in place where we're holding each other accountable to what we say that we're going to do, right? So I think that's been working quite a bit. And then obviously I do like a quarterly sort of like summary as well, of like for the past 3 months. So you have like the weekly report, like weekly reports. You have, the monthly end of month reports. And again, those sessions are also like work through sessions, right? Like you're brainstorming strategies based on challenges that maybe they kind of analyzed as a challenge for the month. And then the end of quarter report is where we kind of looked at that particular quarter and we say, okay, overall month to month to month, this is what we saw. This is how program was executed. Here's the data on partnership conversations. Here's the data on marketing. And then the different programs that we run as well. Here's where we are with some of those things. So kind of really going granular.
Those are all great tools. I think the idea that everyone has visibility on everyone's creates kind of a peer pressure, potentially, not pressure, but a peer accountability. Yeah. And so I think that no one wants to feel, and I shy away from talking about competitiveness, like people getting competitive, but just to know that you're on a team, right? And when the team succeeds, we all succeed. I think that those are really good tactics for that.
Exactly.
Thinking about your mandate and the kinds of work that you do, I noticed a lot of upskilling. So as you're speaking of this, I'm thinking about, these are upskilling tools that you would also probably be sharing with those people who take advantage of your programs. So tell us a little bit more about who are you targeting right now?
Yeah, so we have different buckets. We have the young innovators. So like these are young Africans, across the continent who are in their communities. Maybe they've identified a problem, they've identified a challenge, and they want to build a solution for that challenge, right? They're thinking about products, and they're thinking about product really as a vehicle for solving that challenge. So that's one. And then you have the second bucket of, what we call like AP, like I guess associate product managers, so APMs. These are already product people, and they're already building product within organizations. They could be working with money points. They could be working with Paystack on, financial inclusion or health or whatever the case. But the way that they're building product is not innovative in the sense that it's not solving problems enough or well enough for the end user, right? So the approach in terms of how they're building that product is where they need a little bit more upskilling, right? Because I think our approach is that the way that you build products should be grounded in the local context. A lot of the materials, a lot of the curriculum is sort of very westernized, right, in terms of processes and things like that. And a lot of those processes will not apply in our context because we have certain restrictions, right? So then how do you go about designing products for some African context? How do you go about building that product? First of all, even before you build the product, how do you understand the problem that you're witnessing?
Right.
How do you assess or validate that that's a problem, right? As opposed to maybe a symptom of a problem, right? So giving you some of those tools to say, okay, maybe then you go to the market, you speak to some women because they've identified a challenge that they face. Go to them as opposed to just writing a thesis, I observed this challenge. But did you speak to anyone about that challenge, right? Did you collect data around that challenge? So you have that bucket of innovators as well. So early stage product people and the young entrepreneurs, early stage entrepreneurs as well. And of course, within the ecosystem, in terms of, building that ecosystem that then supports these buckets of people, we have more senior product people that come in as coaches, come in as facilitators, come in as mentors for the programs, and even experienced entrepreneurs as well who come into the founders in terms of maybe one-on-one coaching, maybe, supporting founders around, going around doing, market validation with potential customers, refining a sales strategy with B2B, So we have sort of like that community of experienced professionals as well, who then support these two buckets of folks that I just mentioned. So the early stage entrepreneur who, is thinking about building something or has built like an initial MVP, but really doesn't know where to go with that. And then the product person who is early stage in their career, but is really thinking around how do I build products for Africa in the African context.
Interesting. I'm imagining, because the idea around it being product, because we have a lot of service people who want to do services, right? And so services don't really create jobs the same way that products
They
do,
don't.
right?
Yeah.
And so
product scale.
and exactly. And so when you're thinking about the ecosystem around, so I'm imagining you too are also collecting data so that you are informing the ways that you now approach creating an ecosystem that supports not only their product development, but also their operational development. And so in the companies that you're seeing and you're supporting, where are you seeing the future of work in terms of jobs that are going to be created for products that are reaching or addressing African needs?
Yeah, that's a tough question to respond to now, because a lot of our product people are still very early on, right?
Okay.
They're very, very early stage in the sense of even trying to solve those problems that they're experiencing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But just kind of speaking to what we're seeing in terms of our community of, young innovators across different sectors, right? So we have a thesis that you have to be solving a wicked problem. So it can't just be any problem. You're not just building a product. So you're building a product that's solving for education, that's solving for health, that's solving for inclusive development, all of these different things. And we try to source for some of these ideas in different ways. And like that data gives us insight in terms of, okay, like where are the young people identifying these problems? Where are they trying to innovate around, right? So for example, we did an event here in Lagos in, I think, May 21st for World Product Day. And as part of that, we did like a call for problem statements where we had young innovators across the continent solving problem statements that they've experienced within the community and they're trying to solve for. A lot of that was in agriculture, food security, providing support to farmers, so ensuring that farmers are able to sell their products through like a marketplace app or something like that. And then there's a lot of innovation as well around health. But in health also, it was very interesting for me to see that it was around counterfeit medication, right? Being able to solve for that counterfeit medication issue that's basically rampant across the continent, where you don't know if you're buying a paracetamol, is this actually a real paracetamol or is it like a dupe that's just made somewhere and packaged in the product? So you have these tools that you're able to then use as a consumer to say, is what I am buying or where I'm investing my money, is this, value for money? So there's a lot of technology around that consumer, I guess, how do I even phrase this? Like consumer wellness awareness. Yeah. So consumer awareness. And then we also saw, interestingly enough, and this was the winner for the World Product Day pitch competition, but we saw a solution from South Africa. So again, this was Pan-African. And then some of them, those who were in South Africa or other African countries, were able to pitch their solutions virtually. But the South African team also just had a really interesting solution where, again, it goes back to that inclusive development aspect, right? So these were a group of youth that identified in some parts of South Africa where you have, I guess, sort of like makeshift communities. And this makeshift community, obviously, you don't have addresses, right? You don't have formal addresses. So you could maybe just see like an area where different folks have come together and they've put up like temporary housing. And that temporary housing becomes their home for like the next 10 years, 20 years. Because the city just is not caring for them.
Right.
The consequences of that is if you don't have an address in a lot of the societies, you don't have access to health.
Yeah.
You don't have access to education. You can't report a crime when it happens to you because they need your address, they need to have a file, all those different things, right? You can't call an ambulance because you need an address. So there's this sort of systematic issues that a lot of the innovators are trying to solve for. And then in this case, they basically kind of built out, like, I guess, like easiest way to term it is like virtual addresses for some of these locations. So then you're able to now have an address that you can use to register your child in school. You can use to register at a police station. You can use it to register in a hospital. You can use it to register and get an ID card. Because again, if you don't have an address, how can you get an ID card? Right? So that all of these different systematic things that we see a lot of like our communities experiencing. And I think, again, a lot of the solution is really what I'm seeing anyways. A lot of their solutions, they're not impacting who you would call the middle class, right? They're impacting the very vulnerable. They're impacting the woman who is excluded. from participating in like the local economy because she doesn't have, again, an address and things like that. So in terms of the future of work, it's really interesting in the sense that they're trying to digitize all of these processes, right? So what does that mean for like the informal economy? It means that they're trying to bring all of those things, elements online. They're trying to ensure that for you as a woman farmer in maybe rural South Africa, you're able to use this app that allows you to sell. And for them as the venture owner or as the business owner, they're able to train you now in products, manage that product, but solving again for that specific impact. So there's a lot of that digitalization. There's a lot of bridging the informal and the formal that I'm seeing. And there's a lot of like, how do we structurally solve issues?
Yeah.
Right. Again, through digitization. So those are kind of the things that I've been seeing.
Interesting. So before we move on to my next line of questions, just keying on some things that you've said, you spoke about this Pan-African competition, and then you're living in a new city. And so let's talk about Glocal Speak. So can you share a word, a phrase, or a saying that is a meaningful part of your local experience, and why or how you've come to value it as Glocal Speak?
Oh my goodness. I forgot about this question.
There's so much in Nigeria.
There's just so much. I feel like I've been hearing a lot of like local slangs here just being in Lagos. And my partner always teases me, like, you should try and speak Pidgin more often. I'm like, but I try. And then you laugh at me.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
So what do you want me to do?
Yeah.
But I'm trying anyways to learn. Yeah. Maybe after the next few months, I'm trying to learn Igbo anyway. So we'll see how that goes.
Oh, okay.
But Glocal Speak, that's a hard one.
Have you picked up any Igbo yet?
You know what? It's really funny. If you ask me to say a word, I wouldn't remember. But if you say it, then I'll be like, oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
And I'll know it. So it's sort of like subconsciously I'm picking up things.
Ah, that's good.
Which is interesting.
Good. That's good. So the people around you are speaking Igbo more
Not
than...
really, no.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Well, they don't speak. They're all speaking to me in English.
Right. But there are conversations, because I realize that when I'm in Lagos, I don't hear Igbo so much. I hear a lot of Yoruba.
Yeah. Because Lagos is like a Yoruba.
Yeah.
It's a Yoruba town.
Yeah.
You have a lot of Igbo people here as well, but it's not their town.
It's not their home. Right.
It's not their home.
Yeah.
But yeah, like my partner primarily speaks Igbo with his dad.
Okay.
With his siblings, it's usually English.
Or Pidgin.
Yeah, or Pidgin. Yeah, those two. Yeah.
We'll put a pin on it.
I mean, my basic Pidgin is like, is it how you do or how for you? Those are like my easy ways to kind of get the conversation going and make someone laugh. You know, you walk into the office and you go, how you do now?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I start laughing. I was like, please, don't say it again.
That's the thing. Yeah. They just don't want to let me learn. But how you day is good. How you day? Yeah. And I hear like make it go fast, you know, when you're in a rush. Those, So, okay.
Yeah. There are a lot more of that I think I've picked up. they're not coming to me at the moment.
No, it's fine. It's fine. How you day is a standard Glocal Speak, and it's great. Yeah. Okay. So now thinking about what you mentioned about taking these ideas to market. When you think about and thinking about your own consulting, which is Catalyst Venture, thinking about what it is that you're working on and who you're funding, like who and how are you getting to the funding stage, and what kinds of numbers are you looking at to make those initial, I don't know if you're at the angel phase or, you know, where are these funding decisions coming from on both your sides, from your not-for-profit side and from your consulting side?
Yeah, they're both not-for-profits.
Yeah, okay.
I kind of pivoted quite a bit recently with Catalyst Venture as well. But in terms of the investing, I'm not sure if I fully understand the question, but in terms of the investing, so we're investing in very early stage companies. So we have a fund on the foundation side, on the Innovate Africa Foundation side. There is a micro fund called Innovate Africa Fund.
Yes.
And through that, we invest in, you know, very early stage like MVP founders. So they might have like an initial MVP. And we're looking at, you know, some traction around, you know, have you done, you know, some market validation? You potentially have some users. If you don't have users, you have people who could potentially be converted into users. Some very early insights, right, as to like what have you done in terms of actually validating the solution. And then, of course, like the check sizes can start from as little as like 10K, 50K. Again, depending on the business and depending again, is it like a one founder team? Is it, you know, what's the scalability opportunity for this? What's, you know, again, the market looking like this particular sector?
Right.
What we're doing increasingly more of, because with the funds, as I mentioned earlier, we're kind of now doing a lot of investments under the Wicked Innovation Lab. So within the fund, we started an initiative called Wicked Innovation Lab. And because primarily also because the founders are too early for larger ticket sizes, right? Like you can't be giving them, you know, 200K, 300K because then they don't necessarily have the capacity to manage that money at that point.
Right.
And they might not really need all of it, right? Then it's just a waste. So through the Wicked Innovation Lab, then we have that opportunity to really kind of like test and pilot different ways of venture creation, right? So it could be, again, an innovation challenge. It could be a hackathon. It could be a pitch competition. It could be, you know, Dragon's Den pitch type style deal, or competition rather. So like we have that liberty to say, okay, how do we source, you know, founders that we can invest in through this ecosystem of the Wicked Innovation Lab and then invest in them. So like the sort of like opportunity for that is pretty broad and expanded. It's really up to us to build it out, create it out, test out different ways of doing and then investing. And then obviously through that also it's like smaller check sizes of like around 10K per founder. We could do more, but again, because of the stage that they're at, like you're pretty much like family and friends round at this point, right? Like you haven't reached like the pre-seed round yet. Like it's a very early family and friend stage, because that's a huge gap, right? When you look at the investment landscape,
particularly in Africa.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, and the challenge too there is like, because there is that huge gap, you know, when you see innovators who are building some of the solutions and they don't have the money to like actually go to market with it, right? To test and get the infrastructure that they need to have like 100, 200, 300 users on the platform or 1,000 users on the platform, then that solution just dies out.
Yeah.
Right. So like that's a solution that potentially could have solved for, you know, a critical challenge within a community or even more than that.
Yeah.
So we come in and say like, we want to be like the first investor, like the first check that you're getting to really help you ensure that, you know, you're building out the solution. And then of course, in addition to like the investment, then we support on a lot of coaching opportunities as well. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that answered the question.
Okay.
So then when I think about your brand, so to speak, and you mentioned transitioning the Catalyst venture to a not-for-profit as well. What are some of the motivation for that? So thinking about how, and I'm saying this thinking about how I recognize the challenges to be able to do a lot of this quote unquote impact work is from a private perspective. And so we'd love to understand more about, you know, what were the motivations for you to move or change and what does that now mean for the business?
Yeah, so very good question, because I've had to go through this process of just really assessing a lot of the activities that we're doing under the consulting side of things, and then even seeing where a lot of our opportunities are coming from, right? So in the past couple of months, I had a lot of opportunity around supporting founders individually, right? So founders were looking to raise, how do you kind of help them, kind of prepare them from like even like the business modeling side of things to like the investment readiness side of things. But obviously, like that's also very sporadic, right? It's not continuous. So one of the challenge with the previous model was just that, again, you know, revenue was like very up and down, sporadic, and the opportunity for impact also is not very, you can't really drive in as much as you can say, this is like the area or the problem that I want to solve for. And then you look for opportunities within that. you're still a consulting business. So you need to make revenue, right? So then you start applying for other things that maybe deviate from like where you really want to see impact.
Yeah.
So like over the past, I want to say like over the past like maybe 8 to 10 months, there's been a lot of like reflection really around, development challenges on the continent and how do I want to see impact?
Yeah.
Where am I seeing the challenge with innovation? Where am I seeing the challenge with founders building, innovative products? Where am I seeing the challenge with people using these products? And I just kind of had this, again, just like because I'm involved in other innovation ecosystems and just kind of like, witnessing what's coming out of this ecosystem as well. It just really dawned on me that we don't lack innovators on the continent, like they're everywhere.
Yeah.
We don't lack. So what I felt we weren't doing well was we're not innovating enough in a way that it's accessible to the people who need them. And I'm speaking primarily really around price accessibility, so affordability, right? If you're innovating on health, right, majority of the health solutions will then target people who can pay something, right? So if you need like home testing, right, you just call some, book a doctor on an app and they come to your house and they do your general checkup, you're good to go, right? But a woman who's earning 5,000 naira a month doesn't have that liberty to book that medical service. So how do you innovate around health in a way where it's actually affordable for those individuals who are living under $5 a day? But then as a business, find other ways to make revenue. So that's the challenge, right? So the challenge that the entire innovation, the Catalyst venture ecosystem is putting out there is, I want to see founders, I want to see entrepreneurs who are building across key sectors, but their business model is such that the solution is accessible to like the very marginalized communities amongst ourselves.
Yeah.
And I felt like that's where the gap was, right? In terms of like the innovation ecosystem. We're building products, we're shipping them out, they're in market, they're making money for the startups, but we still see that challenge around inclusive economies. We still see the challenge around like local markets struggling because people are excluded, whether on like the demand side, supply side. So there's a lot of that. So the Innovate Africa ecosystem then kind of evolved into three arms, essentially, right? So it evolved into the foundation, which is where a lot of like the knowledge building is happening. A lot of the partnerships, collaboration is happening. A lot of like the training programs for like general early stage founders is happening. Right now, I'm working on like a pilot program around idea validation again, but around these key pieces of affordability, right? So like you must be solving for affordability in a specific sector. Like that's all I'm interested in, right? So the foundation does a lot of that. And one of the key things that I really want to put forward with the foundation is like the knowledge aspect of it, right? How do we create knowledge? How do we disseminate that knowledge? How do we apply that knowledge? Because we don't have it. And then we have the venture studio arm of it, which is actually the money-making arm of it. It's like the private entity as well. So the venture studio is a private entity where we then say, okay, maybe in a year, we maybe incubate like 5 to 10, depending on capacity as well, 5 to 10 ventures, right? So we take like a problem and venture sort of founder-led approach where either we can put out a call for problems. So we're interested in founders, looking at affordability in clean energy transition.
Yeah.
Right. How do you make sure that, again, the specific demographic of consumers have access to energy? Who is building solutions around that? Then you apply, we go through, and then, incubate you or work with you rather, because again, as a venture studio, we become partner in building that venture, right? So then we work with you for 12 to 18 months. That's the structure now that we have. So we'll work with you 12 to 18 months on the venture side, and then bring in the investors from the angel side of things. So then now the investors, through the angel investors, we put together the resources that we then invest as a collective in some of these startups. So then with some of these startups, the idea then is that you're looking at a bit of higher check sizes, where you're looking at 100K, 100 to 150 per company, because this ideally should be founders that are serious about, again, building solutions and shipping those solutions in the market. So it kind of is like a pipeline approach where the foundation kind of then incubates like the very early stage founders to build the knowledge, to build the community. And then maybe we select, 5 to 10, maximum 10, because I don't think, again, that bandit, right? Again, you're incubating some of these companies and you're involved in every aspect of growing those ventures. So then you incubate them through the venture studio and then access to capital through the angel group. So I think structuring it this way just sort of is more realistic for how I want to see impact and kind of gives me a bit more control around like, okay, here's a problem that I want to solve for through this organization, as opposed to, you having a consulting and then just sort of like looking for other opportunities that maybe align with your skill set and then just applying for those opportunities.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Thinking about how the foundation is funded, and I see partnerships are a big part of that, right?
Yeah.
How do you see the future of partnership, your present of partnerships, and the future of partnerships really being that proper engine that continues to fund and spur new products and new developments and help facilitating the ecosystem's survival?
So the past few months has been a lot of partnership conversations.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Those are always interesting,
Yeah.
And again, like the local context sometimes is different in terms of how you have these conversations and, the dragon and whatnot. But I think the partnership landscape for product innovation in Africa, there's something there. If I look at the Nigerian market where, we're trying to get some partnerships, well, we were able to get some partners, like more like sponsors to support some of our core initiatives. But I find that it's harder to get like longer term partners, right? So in terms of signing multi-year deals, so a lot of the conversations are really just project based. So for example, I have a conference. Do you want to be a partner for that conference? As opposed to, here's the objective that I have for the next 5 years, right? I'm looking at, ensuring that we, bring to market 100,000 product people who are solving these challenges. Do you want to partner with us for the next 5 years?
Right.
On some of the different initiatives and maybe allocate, 10,000, 20,000, 500, whatever the case might be, to ensure that we deliver on some of these goals. And here's how you benefit from that interaction, right? So you see much smaller check sizes in terms of partnership, but then you also see shorter term partnerships. And then I also see a lot of partnerships where it's more sort of like, we don't necessarily want to give you the money, but we can cover this aspect of the program. So like if you're doing a mixer, for example, we can pay for the mixer and that's our partnership, right? So I'm not seeing enough partnership towards the sort of outcome.
The meaningful, right?
The meaningful work. Yeah. So I'm not seeing partner. Yeah, which is very interesting. So that's been on the product innovation arm of things. That's been the challenge. And then even when I look at like global product partners who are also actually doing multi-year partnerships, but they're not, crazy about Africa, so to speak, in the sense that maybe they have a product and the product is, available in the US, it's available in Europe, but Africa is not a market for them, right? And they're not really interested in Africa becoming a market for them. So then how do you bring them in as a sponsor when they have zero interest in this market, right? So a lot of like the product sponsors globally don't have that presence on the continent, which makes it challenging. So then you kind of have to then rely on like the product-led organization. So maybe the startups and some of these other entities, right, who then come in and say, oh, I see value here in the product ecosystem. We can support on so and so and so project. But the sort of like true partnership where you see, you're speaking multi-year. I'm committing this amount for 5 years towards this goal. And within those 5 years, obviously we have different activities that we execute on. That I'm not seeing.
Yeah. That's a persistent challenge. It's a good segue into my mindset hack. So thinking about how to of just generally changing mindsets. How do you hack your mindset? What are your tools, techniques, things that help you do that?
To be honest, I just drink a lot of tea. I feel like I'm always sort of like on the go, always doing a lot of different things. If it's, I'm not working on this, I'm working on that. But when I have this moments where I just, maybe I'll do like a moringa tea or do like a hibiscus.
Yeah.
And then I just have that moment of just, even if it's 10 minutes, 30 minutes, I just reframe my mind, and I'm sitting with myself. I'm thinking about, okay, doing all of this. Like it's a meditation, right? Like I'm sitting, I'm thinking, I'm doing all of this. What's the end goal? How do I really recenter all of that back to me and how I want to show up, how I want to show up to other people? how I want to show up for the work that I'm trying to do. So like honestly, that moment where, my partner might just be like, are you sleeping? No, I'm not.
Like I'm just enjoying my tea. Yeah.
I'm just enjoying my tea, and I'm just sort of like, in this space of reflecting on how I'm showing up with work, is how I'm showing up, whether it's with Castle's Ventures or whether it's with Innovate Africa. Is that aligning with the goals that I'm setting for myself around how I want to live my life, right? Which is, being impact led, which is escaping the sort of like urgency of everything. Everything must be done by today, by tomorrow, by like there's always another urgency. But it's like, how do I calm myself back? How do I come back to that place, to that center where everything just sort of like vents out? So that helps me reframe my mind again in terms of think the bigger picture, right? Don't think around like micro activities. Don't think around, the things that you have to do on the day to day. Use this moment that you have to then say, okay, is all of this in alignment with what I'm kind of like working towards? Yeah.
Your higher or highest self, so to speak.
Exactly. Because listen, like the days can test you.
I can imagine.
The days can test you. So like there are those moments where you kind of feel out of self, and then you come back and you're like, okay,
it's okay.
Maybe next time let's do it differently.
Right. Just reflection. I love that. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So before we get into a little bit more about who Tina is when she's not on the hustle, right? Just building ecosystems. I want to ask you what's new and next. So what's new and next? What can we expect in the next year in this new role that you're in, or new programs or anything like that?
Yeah, what's new? I mean, there's a lot that's happening with the Innovate Africa side of things. A lot of new programs. We're launching our first cohort of the Product Leadership Accelerator program. So this is young Africans who want to learn all that they can about, building products, things like that. So I'm really excited about that. And then our goal is that in October, we're having a conference also in Kigali. Really focused on that. So there are quite a number of activities. And then, of course, towards next year, thinking around again, what do we want to do with the Wicked Innovation Lab? What sort of, venture building programs, especially, do we want to run? And how do we want to support some of these founders who then come through some of the programs? So I think on that side of things, it's always busy. Like there's everything. There's always something that's up in the pipeline. Now, the kind of venture side of it, as I mentioned, I'm trying to run a first cohort of this idea validation program. So hopefully in the next month or so, I'll be putting out a call for applications. It's a cohort-based program. So obviously founders, you have to screen founders who would then go become part of that program. My goal is that as we're kind of building out this ecosystem, that I can get some very solid partners to come on board, support our goal, whether it's from the foundation side, whether it's from the venture studio side of things, or the angel side of things, just folks who are just passionate about inclusive development and are interested in how to use innovation to address that. So so hopefully in the next year or so we do more programs around that.
That's great. I just really love the focus on the product side, because I think that's really key. So keep up good work on that.
So we're doing something.
Exactly.
I should also mention, because like when we're creating the Innovate Africa ecosystem, we didn't just wake up and say, okay, like, or the team rather, right? Because the founder of the ecosystem of the foundation, Christian Idiodi, is like a very sound, like solid product person, right? He's coaching, senior product people in the US, different parts of the world, the banks, JP Morgan, like CPOs, others. So he's a very solid guy. And he's also a partner at Silicon Valley Product Group. So that's another organization that really is leading the charge when it comes to product-led innovation. So we bring all of that knowledge and all of that ecosystem within the conference so that some of the participants can have access to that knowledge free of charge. Because again, if they're to pay Silicon Valley Product Group for like the master classes, it's not accessible, right?
Exactly.
It's not, and they only come to a continent once, which is for the conference, right? So again, really, really crucial. Nice. But I was going to say the way that we even kind of arrived, like when Christian initially was building out the ecosystem, he didn't just wake up and say, I want to build out this ecosystem, right? He did a lot of discovery in the early days. So he traveled to to Ghana, traveled to Nigeria, traveled to Rwanda, Kenya, South Africa, and just had conversations with a lot of the innovation hubs, a lot of founders, a lot of community leaders to really just understand what the gap was. And then, of course, that led to our thesis around product innovation or product-led innovation.
Right.
It led to, the thesis around the fund in terms of investing in founders who are very early on because there's that gap in the investment landscape, right? And just ensuring that those innovations aren't dying down because, they're too early for like the funds to invest in them. So a lot of the conversations with community members with the Innovation Hub led to what the ecosystem is at the moment.
Nice. Wonderful. Okay. So who is Tina when she's not working and in the lanes traveling across Africa? We want to know, are you a reader? Are you a watcher? Are you a listener? Or what else do you do in your leisure time? And what are some of your favorite reads, watches, or listens?
Honestly, I was an avid reader. I was an avid reader like years ago. Right now, I can't say that I am anymore.
Okay.
Though I try, I
Yeah.
think I've been on one book. There's one book that's on my bedside. It's been on my bedside for like 2 months now that I'm trying to read. It's called Conjured Sisters, I think.
Oh, okay. I think I've heard of it.
Yeah. Very interesting book that I'm trying to get through, but I think again, life happens. So I'm really trying to get back to being a reader because I think when I was younger, I could go through I could go through a book in like 2 days, like a massive book in 2 days. Like I would just sit and read,
Yeah.
But something's happened. But what I do right now, I feel like I'm evolving into the space where I'm really, really like my free time is really more around how do I slow down, So how do I slow down everything else? So a lot of that is translating into like health related stuff. So food, exploring different types of African food, African spices that can help me kind of in the process of like cooking. Then I'm like, that's my self-care time. I'm leaning back into my heritage and I'm cooking something that's good for my body. And so now I'm obsessed with like trying to discover a lot of indigenous African spices.
Okay.
That I can feed myself with and feed my family with. And then that also translates to all the herbs. So like the teas.
Yes.
The butters for your skins, for your hair. So like just kind of looking a little bit more at a bit more of like a holistic way of doing things that's a little bit more grounded, that slows me down. Learning a lot around that. So learning a lot again around like some of the different African spices that maybe even us as Africans, we don't even use, we don't use anymore in our everyday cooking.
Right.
So my goal is that at some point, as I start collecting all of my different spices, then I can do like, how you can have like a collage or like a photo book, but do something similar, but for the spices. So maybe have like a dried spice and then have like all the, right on the corner of it, like all the different benefits.
That's
so that's
nice.
a mini project that I'm trying to work on.
Okay. I like it. Tactile and sensory, full on sensory.
Exactly.
There you go.
So I think my goal is just having that cabinet of all my herbs and spices.
Yeah. Good job. I'm loving it. I'm seeing it actually. I'm looking at your back wall and it's organized. And so I can see your cabinet being very organized as well. Wow. Well, Tina, thank you so much for joining us again and telling us this has been so insightful on this idea of different ways of thinking about venture and building and creating jobs in Africa. And I'm so impressed with you staying true to the course of really, let's make impact. Let's figure out these problems for Africa. It's so important. And so before we go, do you have any last thoughts you want to share with our listeners?
Well, first, thanks to you for having me again. And I think I've enjoyed our conversation. I think it's always good to have that moment to just really, again, reflect. I think speaking to you is a way of me also reflecting on sort of like what I've been doing. So I really appreciate that. One of the things that I see that I want to put out there is sometimes for us as individual Africans, we feel that investment is out of question for us as individuals, right? But doesn't have to be, right? Investing in some of these ventures can take as little as $1,000, can take as little as $3,000, as long as you can pull them together and, have different instruments. So I think for us, as we're thinking about innovation, we're thinking around impact, we should also think about how can we then come together individually as a community to then foster that development, foster that opportunity for the, future entrepreneur who is solving, but then also for ourselves, right? Because we're then creating wealth for ourselves, we're creating some kind of impact for ourselves. My call is that let's think about investing differently. Let's think about pooled capital. So whether that's through like an SVP, it could be, again, we already do this, right? Like our mothers did this when they did like the savings and loans groups. Like we already have this in our like economic history, right? So we can do this when it comes to investment, right? We don't have to think that, well, to be an angel investor, you must have 100,000, 200,000 salary, you have to be accredited as an investor. Like you can invest in other ways as an angel, right? So I think we need to kind of just open that box and say, okay, how do I then start becoming more active in this ecosystem?
Right. I love that. It's really investing to solve our own problems.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because what we're seeing is that a lot of the capital, like we don't own the capital that comes in. Right?
Exactly.
So if there are these trends where there's, maybe the investors are saying, well, it's too risky to invest in, transportation in Nigeria because of so and so, or it's too risky to invest in fintech because of so and so. Then if one investor starts pulling out, another investor then pulls out, right? Techstar Nigeria started not long ago, I think maybe like a year or 2 years ago, and it's really shut down, right? So you see, and even before I moved to Lagos, right, there was already in the West, anyways, amongst investors, the sentiment of investing in Africa is really risky right now because you don't know if you're going to recover your capital again, right? Like you don't know. First, not even thinking about like gains, but you don't even know if you're going to recover your initial capital. So I think,
and it's really not true. It's not true. Africa produces sustained results. Yeah, sustained returns.
It's not true. And the people who know that is us Africans, because we know our society, we know our economy, we know the nuances of how we work with each other. So we might see the risks, but we know how to navigate those risks. But we also see the opportunities, right? So like, let's kind of lean a little bit more into each other in terms of taking ownership of those opportunities and building this ecosystem a bit more so that our entrepreneurs are not reliant on external capital. And the downside of the external capital is by the time the investors are cashing out, that money is flowing back out of the continent. It doesn't stay.
Exactly.
Right. So we need to keep capital on the continent to sustain our growth.
Mic drop. Let's do it. Thank you so much, Tina. I really appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you for having me.
All right, Glocal citizens, this has been another episode of the podcast. You can catch us Tuesdays with new episodes at glocalcitizenspod.com or wherever you get your podcast. Please like, share, subscribe, leave us a review. Check out the show notes. You can have access to all of the great information that Tina shared about their programs, opportunities to invest, etc., etc. And until next time, bye for now.